Good evening, a warm welcome to all of you to the webinar series hosted by Advocates Association Bengaluru. We have with us today Mr. Sachidananda K, Advocate High Court of Karnataka. Sir, we are happy to have you with us today. Welcome to the webinar. With immense pleasure, I would now like to introduce our today's speaker, Mr. Sachidananda K, obtained his law degree from University Law College, Bangalore. He also obtained his master's degree from Bangalore University, where he has secured second rank. He holds a post-graduation in commerce specialized in banking and insurance. He's been practicing both on civil and criminal side, both in the trial court as well as the High Court of Karnataka. He has worked as a part-time faculty with University Law College, Bangalore and Sheshadripuram Law College. He has delivered lectures at various forums, including at the Judicial Academy, Bangalore. He's authored various articles on contemporary legal issues published in national and international magazines. Sir, on behalf of Advocates Association Bengaluru, I extend a warm welcome to you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vikram. And thank you for the cordial invitation. And I thank Advocate Association Bengaluru for giving this opportunity to give a lecture before the august body of legal luminaries. And I will share some of my views on the Islamic jurisprudence on will, gift, and succession. Here, the topic I have used as Islamic ilm. Here, the ilm means knowledge. The word ilm is knowledge. You may have heard of ulemas among us Muslims. Hey, ulema is a person who has ilm, knowledge, jurisprudence. So, ulema is a judge. So, I have used this particularly, I use the word ilm in my series, this series. So, before starting on the aspect of the law of gift, will, and succession, I want to touch upon the rudimentary aspects of Islamic law. Because without the rudimentary aspect, we cannot have a holistic approach to the entire aspect of Islamic law. First, I will take you to the what would be the entire course structure of my webinar. First will be the rudimentary aspects of the source of Islamic law and the schools of Islamic law. Just I'll take 5 minutes, that's all. Then I'll touch upon in detail in respect of the gift, will, and succession. Because without understanding the rudimentary aspect of Islamic law, we cannot understand the succession aspect. Because there is a different viewpoints as well as different aspect of succession practiced among various schools. First, let us go to the sources of Islamic law. First source, there are 5 sources of Islamic law. There is one is Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, Qiyas, and Fatwas. Here, when we come to the first aspect, that is the Quran. Here, the Quran is the holy book which has a divine interpretation. Here, when I say divine interpretation, here this entire revelation was given to Muhammad the Prophet by angel Gabriel. So it is a revelation by the God. So entire Quran is the word of God. So it does not have any human institution or human interference is not there. So out of 6,000 verses of Quran, we have 200 verses which directly deal with the law, the jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence. Out of 200 verses, 80 verses deal with personal law. So we today have to deal with 80 verses of Islamic law, which was said to be directly derived from divine origin. So as it is a divine origin, which is of the Quran, here human agency cannot alter. So amendment, alteration is not entertained in this 80 verses in respect of personal law of Islam. Next, we'll go to the second source, that is Sunnah or tradition. Sunnah means trodden path. Here, this also relates to Muhammad the Prophet. So, here we can say it's a kind of practice or a precedent followed by Muhammad the Prophet, using the verses which he had derived from the divine origin. So, whenever he practiced the verses in his execution of the Islamic verses, that was recorded by the various authors, and these were considered as practices which was put in by the Muhammad the Prophet. So it has equivalent relevance that of Quran. Third one is Ijma, that is the principles established by agreement amongst highly qualified scholars. Here it is, Ijma is the main contribution of Islamic jurisprudence, because many jurists throughout these years, centuries of Islamic practice, legal practice, have interpreted, and we can consider it as like a precedent, the jurist precedent, that is, they give interpretation what Quran actually says, what was the actual practice of Muhammad the Prophet, that is Ijma. Fourth is Qiyas. Here, Qiyas is that of reasoning by analogy. While appointing a judge to Mecca, Muhammad the Prophet asked him, what is the source? What do you want to follow? He says, I'll follow the Quran. Then he says, if Quran does not say, does not give certain answers, what you will follow? He said, I'll follow your Sunnah, your Hadith. If it is not there, what you will do? Then he says, I follow my reasoning. Here, this reasoning, we can say that of akin to that of justice, equity, and reason. That is when that is akin to that of English jurisprudence of reasoning, justice, and equity. Last is fatwas. These fatwas are the precedents issued by the Maulis, which is binding on the community. But recently, in 2014, Supreme Court has passed a judgment on the legal validity of fatwas. That is in Vishwalochan Madan versus Union of India. 2014, Volume 7, SCC 707. Supreme Court said that the fatwas does not have legal binding in Republic of India, because it does not have any backing of constitution or any established law, and hence fatwas cannot be considered as law. So moving on to further, we'll come to the schools of Islamic law. We have two major Islamic schools. One is Sunnis and Shias, that is a major sect in Muslims, Sunnis and Shias. Based on here, it is, even though it is based on the authority on primogeniture, but for jurisprudential angle, we will look into the text or authors who follow these two schools. Under the school of Sunnis, we have Hanafi school, which is the major contributor to Sunni school of inheritance, law of inheritance. Second is Maliki school. Third is Shafi school. And this Shafi school is the major contributor for the third source of Islamic jurisprudence, that is Qiyas. And fourth is Ahmad ibn Hanbal school, one of the major schools in India. And next, second sect is Shias. Okay, coming to after the rudimentary aspect of Islam, let us go to today's aspect of Islamic jurisprudence on first aspect of gift. Gift is called as hiba in Islamic jurisprudence. A hiba is a transfer of property made immediately and without any consideration by one person to another and accepted by or on behalf of the latter. This is what Transfer of Property Act also says. Simple. That is, there should be transfer of property. It may be movable or immovable, and it should be made immediately, and there should be no consideration. So consideration of gift is always love and affection. No consideration by one person who is capable to make gift and accepted by a person who is capable to receive the gift, or on behalf of the latter. That is, if he is incapable because of minority or munacity, any other person on his behalf can receive the gift made by the donor. That is the definition of hiba as per Islamic jurisprudence. Who can make a gift under Islamic law? Any Muhammadan can make a gift who is of sound mind and a major, and he should be capable of making gift. So only two considerations are there. He should be a Muhammadan and of a sound mind, and it should be major. So under Islamic law, majority is that of, especially in property, is that of Indian Majority Act only after the operation of Indian Majority Act, that is 18 years. Only for the marriage, it is puberty, age of puberty. But in respect of the property, the Indian Majority Act comes into play, that is age of 18 years. Okay. Next, here, a gift has to be in whole. He can make a gift of his whole property. There is no bar under Islamic law. He can make portion of his property as a gift, or entire property can be given to gift to anybody of his hire or to any stranger. He can exclude his stranger also, exclude his heirs also while making the gift. And the donor's property, this object of the gift, should be the present. He should be holding, as well as it can be actionable. It can be actionable also. So we can call it as khas. The property should be his khas, his own. He should be in possession of it. Khas. We can to use Islamic word. It should be his khas mal. It should be his personal property. And here, when property is given, the property has to be delivered. Here, delivery should be actual, or it can be constructive. Here, what is constructive here? Actual gift delivery is that if it is a movable, he can hand over directly to the donee, or it is immovable, he can make a test or like a conveyance, one thing, or even a orally he can make, but it should be by declaration. There should be a specific declaration for conveying the property. And in case of, when I say constructive possession, let us assume a property is mortgaged or tenants are there in the property. How can he make a delivery of the property? It is not possible. Here, the constructive possession will come into play as such. So he can say that the property is in possession of the tenant, or it is mortgaged, but even though it is mortgaged, I am making delivery of the property, and the donee should say, along with the tenants, or even though it is mortgaged, I am accepting the property. He has to make a acceptance declarations. Here, Supreme Court in Maqbul Alam Khan versus Kodaijia, Maqbul Alam Khan versus Kodaijia, year 1966, SC 1194, said that even a constructive delivery of possession of the gift is permissible under Islamic jurisprudence. It can be not actual, it can be permissible. Constructive possession can also be done. Next, the major aspect of Islamic jurisprudence is that the gift need not be in writing. Here, gift can be done orally also. So a Muslim, if he wants to deliver his property by way of gift, he can do it by orally. He need not do it in writing. Go to sub-register office, register it. He can make a declaration saying that I am hereby giving away my property to the so and so called Dhoni, and Dhoni has to accept it. Here, in Hafiza Bibi versus SK Farid, Hafiza Bibi versus SK Farid, 2011, 5, SEC, page 654. Supreme Court in para 24 says that it gives three essential aspects of Islamic jurisprudence in respect of oral gift. It says gift, if these three essential conditions are found in the gift, it is sufficient. What are the three essentials? First essential is declaration of the gift by the donor. He has to give declaration. The declaration can be oral or it can be by writing. Second is acceptance of the gift by the donee. Donee has to accept the gift. And thirdly, there should be the delivery of possession. And delivery of possession, as I said earlier, can be actual or constructive delivery of possession. So if these three things are proved, three essentials are proved, then under Islamic law, gift is conveyed. So under Islamic law, gift is not essentially has to be under documented. As well as this aspect has been upheld in another judgment, Rashida Khatun versus Ashik Ali. Rashida Khatun versus Ashik Ali, 2014, 10 SEC, page number 459. Here, what is this special treatment? Whether this oral gift is recognized by the law, Indian law, yes. Transfer of Property Act recognizes it. Transfer of Property Act under section 123, what it mandates? It says, it gives essential conditions of a gift. When any immovable property has to be gifted, it has to be registered, a document has to be done, it has to be signed by the donor and the donee, it should be accepted, delivery should be there, and the essential condition, another essential condition is that two witnesses has to attest the document. But section 129 makes an exception. 129 of TP Act makes an exception. It says the operation of chapter 7, when we say operation of chapter 7 of TP Act, so under section 123 is excluded here. The operation of chapter 7 of TP Act is excluded in respect of Muslim gifts, Muhammadan gifts. So the TP Act itself provides that operation of 123 is not there in respect of Muslim gift of conveyance. In that respect, here the law of the land supports this gift. As well as section 17, when we look into section 17 and section 49 of Registration Act, what section 17 says? 17 says when registration is compulsory. And section 49 says what is the effect of unregistered document. Let us say oral document is a Muslim has conveyed the gift by way of a document which is not registered. Whether it can be registered or whether it should be mandatory registered, it is not necessary, because Supreme Court has clearly stated that what are the essential conditions? Only three conditions has to be followed. So in respect of the Islamic conveyance of the property in respect of gift, it can be done orally, it can be unregistered, it need not be documented. Here, declarations, receiving, acceptance, delivery should be there. So, but as a lawyer, we always have that. If it goes to the court, what should we do? Always it is there. Every time it is there. How to prove it? Or if there is another document, registered document, how can it be taken into consideration? Here, when we say oral gift is there, then here the entire we have to take the help of section 3 of Evidence Act, circumstantial evidence. We have to go by the strict 5 golden principles of Evidence Act in respect of circumstantial evidence. It has to be proved. Many times there will be, let us say there is a oral transfer of the document, as well as there is a registered document of the gift, which has to be taken into consideration. Always court has to follow section 91 of Evidence Act. What section 91 says of Evidence Act? It speaks about best evidence rule. Wherever there is a registered document, it has to be taken into consideration. But if we have to prove under Islamic, or that before prior to that oral document, oral gift has to be done, then we have to follow all the exclusions which has been laid down under Evidence Act for section 91. They have to prove it. Here it is quite difficult, then, but it has to prove as per the circumstances to show the declarations, delivery, acceptance of the gift. Next, after going to the next aspect is that the gift can be made by the medium of trust. Here, a trust can be appointed. Here I'm saying a trust. I'm not speaking about the waqf here. Waqf is different and trust is different. Waqf is a religious institution. Here, a trust can be also made, and through the medium of the trust and appointing an executor, gift can be made. Wherein the again declaration, acceptance, and acceptance of the gift has to be made by the trustee of the trust on behalf of the beneficiary. Next, another aspect here we can look into, that is the one word is called as musha. Musha, M-U-S-H-A-A, musha. Here, musha means undivided interest in the share of a property. The question here is that, can a gift of undivided interest in the property can be made where delivery is not possible? Here, Islamic law says that a musha can be a subject matter of gift and undivided interest can be made. Simple example is that if a husband wants to give gift part of the undivided interest of the residential house which they are living to his wife, it can be given. Only has to say that I am giving gift to you, kindly receive it, and wife has to say that I have received, and there is constructive delivery of the property. So here musha is that undivided interest of the property has been given to the wife. And next is another aspect is the revocation of the gift. Can a gift be revoked under Islamic law? Yes, gift can be revoked, but before delivery of the property. Before delivery of the property. So a donor makes a declaration, I am giving the property to the donee. Donee says, I have accepted. But before the delivery of the property from the hands of the donor to the donee, if donor changes his mind and says, I don't want to give, then gift is revoked. Once delivery of possession has been given to the hands of the donee, the gift is completed. Islamic jurisprudence and many jurists says that how it can be revoked is only going to the court. Only by the decree of the court, the revocation of the gift can be made. So this is the aspect of gift under Islamic jurisprudence. Next, let us go to the concept of will. Concept of will is called as wasiyat. Will is wasiyat in Islamic jurisprudence. It is the testament where a person bequeaths the property after his death. But a strange aspect of Islam is quite a unique aspect to the Islamic jurisprudence. I will tell you a story. One story I'll tell a story which happened during the time of Muhammad the Prophet. Here we can call it as an hadith. That is the second source of Islamic jurisprudence. One Sayyid ibn Abi Waqas, he was sick and he believed that he is about to die. So he approaches Muhammad the Prophet and he says that I'm about to die, but I want to bequeath my property after my death. I want to bequeath my entire property to charity, and I want to exclude my daughter. For which Muhammad the Prophet refuses. He says, no, don't do it. Then again, the Sayyid proposes, what about half of the share? Shall I give half of the share as a charity? Muhammad the Prophet says, no. Again, reluctantly, Sayyid says, he proposes, shall I give 1/3? He says, because of his repeated request to make the charity, Muhammad the Prophet reluctantly approves and says, okay, 1/3 is fine, he says. This is the source of Islamic law where acceptance of the proposal of Sayyid ibn Abi Waqas for bequeathing 1/3 of his share in by way of wasiyat has been taken, and now we are following the same aspect. That is, a Muhammadan can bequeath his property to the extent of 1/3 of his share. So it is a bar also. It is a limitation on the part of a Muslim. Because another aspect is that I'll come to one translated verse of Quran where it says that what is the wealth in the hands of a Muslim? What the holy verse says. I'll relate the same thing to this will also. I'll come to it later. So here, the unique aspect of Muslim jurisprudence in respect of the will is that here the will can be made to the extent of 1/3 of the share of the Muhammadan. So more than 1/3 of the share, he cannot make the will. If it is more than 1/3, the excess will be considered as void. It is void ab initio. That one excess of 1/3 cannot be taken into consideration, and the excess of 1/3 has to go as per the succession of Islamic law. So, but there is another catch is there. If the 1/3, if more than the 1/3 is made, and it is in respect of the one of the heirs, and the other after the death of the testator, if the other legal heirs makes an acceptance saying that yes, we forgo our right, Quranic rights, and we accept the excess of 1/3 share which has been given by the testator or the testator or the father, for example, we accept such division, then only the excess of 1/3 will come into effect. Or else, if they don't accept, the excess of 1/3 shall be thrown into the hatchpot of succession. It goes to the aspect of succession, and it has to be divided as per the rules of succession. Here, what is the reason? What is the reason here is that the hadith of Muhammad the Prophet, which I had told you, that is not to give more than 1/3. Muhammad the Prophet says, giving more than 1/3, he says that why, told that Sayyid, he says, why you want to leave your legal heir in pittance? Why don't you want to leave them in rich? Why do you want to give charity? That is the very aspect of that 1/3, only 1/3 has been share of bequeathing has been restricted under Islamic law. Next, can a bequest be made to an unborn child? A child which has not been unborn under Islamic law. Another aspect is that a child which is not in existence cannot given any bequest. It's here, but a child which is yet to be born, which has been conceived, child which is in the womb, which has been conceived, be given, can be made as a donee through its mother. But child which has not been, if I say I bequeath to the property to my grandchild, to my son who is yet to be married, such will cannot be. It is such will is void. If my son is married and his wife is pregnant, if she is carrying, she is conceived, then I can make a will. Such will to the unborn child is permitted under Islamic law. So, but again there is a catch here. Again there is a catch that the child should be in the womb and the child should be born within 6 months of the date of the will. The child should be born within the 6 months of the date of the will. If it is not born, if it dies, then such will becomes void. And as well as if after 6 months, if the child is born, even then also such will becomes void as such. Next, as conditional will or contingency will is considered as void, as in general law also it is considered as so. No condition can be laid for a will, or contingency can be laid that if this thing happens only the bequest has to happen. It is same as that of Indian Succession Act. As well as when a will is there, and another aspect is that again the will need not be in writing. There can be a oral will as well as it can be writing. Again, the oral will has to be declared. It should be properly declared. One aspect of Muslim jurisprudence is that if any declaration is made before two adult Muslim member of the community, and they are witness to such a oral declarations, and they come to the court and they declare that let it be for the gift or the will, then their standing, their oral evidence will be taken into consideration as a declaration. Let it be for the in respect of the talaq, in respect of the will or a gift. So here the standing of two adult Muslim or a Muhammadans will be taken into consideration. So two declarations, two witnesses, oral witnesses can be taken into consideration. So two witnesses has to be there. So will need not be in writing, or it can be oral. Again, as in general will, the two witnesses are necessary. All those is not to be considered here. As this same thing can be what Supreme Court has laid down in the cases of Hafiza Bibi versus S.K. Farid can be taken into consideration as a parametria here. Next, can a non-Muhammadian can be made as an executor in a will? A non-Muhammadian can be made as an executor in a will. Yes, a non-Muhammadian can be made as an executor will, but the beneficiary should be Muhammadans. Beneficiary should be the Muhammadans, but the executor should be he can be a Hindu, Muslim, or any non-Muslims. Another aspect is in respect of another unique conveyance is Marz-ul-Maut. Marz-ul-Maut. This Marz-ul-Maut is in between gift and will. It is we can say that hybrid of gift and will. What is Marz-ul-Maut? Marz is intention, all in the mouth, death. That is the gift in deathbed. Gift in the deathbed. Marz-ul-Maut. Here, this means gift made during death or during the illness which may cause death. So the donee or the testator should be in such a in that position where he should be dying or he should be suffering from incurable disease and death is near him. And here again the condition is that he can gift or make such a gift only to the extent of 1/3 of his share, akin to that of a will. 1/3 of his share only. and all conditions of the gift, the three important conditions of the gift has to be followed. That is, he has to make a declaration, delivery of the property should be there, and acceptance of the delivery should be gift and delivery should be done by the donee. But here the catch is only to the 1/3 extent of the property of the person who is making such gift or a will. Okay, now let us come to the major aspect of Muslim law, that is uh, property distribution. Property distribution or interstate succession according to Islam. Here, one aspect I have to say here is that I have at the starting of this webinar, I had said about the sources of Islamic law. Here, how the sources of Islamic law has come into prevail in India is that India has passed British India had passed a legislation called as Shariat Act of 1937. Shariat Act of 1937, where Section 2 says it is not a big legislation. It is a very small legislation where, but it is a wholesome legislation. It clearly says that whatever personal Shariat says, whatever Sharia says in respect of marriage, divorce, dower, mahar, personal in respect of succession, gift, will, waqf, the Sharia has to be followed. What is Sharia? The sources of law, which I have stated at the initial stage of the webinar. So here, the Muslim personal law, Sharia, we don't have any law. We directly have to go to the very sources of Muslim law. So when we come to the interstate succession, again we have to look into the two schools of Muslim law here. That is the Sunni and Shia. Sunni has a different pattern of distribution of succession, and Shia has a different pattern of succession. Even though certain aspects are uniform together, but in respect of the pattern, there is a slight division is there in respect of devolving of the property. Let us go to it. Here, as I said earlier, the Quran says in respect of the property, the wealth of a Muslim does not belong to him. The wealth of a Muslim does not belong to him. It is the divine gift to a Muslim. It is given by Allah. So who is the owner of the wealth? It is the God, Almighty God. That is what Quran says. It says that whatever belongs to a Muslim, it belongs to the Almighty Allah. And the Quran says, it depicts that a Muslim, even though he earns wealth, as per the dictum of Quran, he is a trustee of the wealth. He is a trustee of his own wealth, and he has to follow the commandments of the God. And what commandments? The Quran under chapter 4 says that how wealth has to be distributed after the death of a Muslim or a Muhammadian. So a Muslim cannot decide how his wealth has to pass after his death. As earlier we had discussed in respect of the will, his decision in respect of bequeathing will go only to the extent of 1/3. That is the limitation aspect. After that 1/3, whatever the remaining portion, it has to go as per the Quranic verses or the word of the God. Here, let us go how the shares will be divided as such. Here, as I said earlier, there are two different schools. Here, Sunnis follow the Hanafi law of inheritance. Sunnis follow Hanafi school of inheritance, and Shia follow the Shia school of inheritance. The Quran says, as I said in chapter 4:11, there is a particular verse in Quran in chapter 4:11, verse 11, 4.11. It says, "You know not who among your children and parents are nearest to you in benefit. This is the law of God. Indeed, God is wise and all-knowing." This is the verse which is stated in the Quran. It says God is deciding in respect of the wealth of a person after his death. So God is wise than the human being, and He knows who is nearest and dearest to Him, because we decide as per our emotions. We decide our emotions and sentiments. God will not decide as per the emotions and sentiments. Okay. Now, three classes of heirs are there in both the Sunnis and Shias. I'm giving a common class of inheritance or the heirs here. First is the commonly known as sharers, or we can call them as Quranic shares, or farhaid or mirrat. They are called as Quranic shares are called as farhaid, mirrat, or they are called as fixed sharers. Quran has fixed their share. As I said earlier, in respect of the sources of Islamic law, that is first source Quran, there cannot be amendments. There cannot be human interference. There cannot be human institutional interference. So no legislation can interfere in this aspect of Quranic shareholders. But difference in this shareholder pattern in respect of the Sunnis and Shias is that in Sunnis there are 12 categories of inheritors, and in Shias there are 9 categories of inheritors. Only there is a small change of inheritors. In Shias, in Sunnis there are 12 categories. In Sunnis there are 9 categories. Okay. The second class is the residuaries. That is, who take no prescribed shares. Residuaries don't have any prescribed shares of as per the Quranic shares. What has been left after devolving the property to the shareholders, the sharers, the remaining will go to the residuaries. Here, the strange aspect is that the son does not come under the first category of sharers. He will not come under the faryad. He comes under the second category. He is the residuary. Son comes under the residuary shareholder. And the third is distant kindred, who do not come under the above two classes. So first let us go to the first, how when a Muslim Muhammadan dies, how the property will be devolved. First is that as soon as a person dies, here his estate is, the wealth of his estate is responsible not for the legal heirs. It is responsible, his wealth is responsible for the, first is payment of funeral expenses. First is funeral expenses, then for his debts and legacies, whatever legacies he has left, that is he has left the will to the extent of 1/3. All that has to be discharged. His funeral expenses has to be given, his debt has to be discharged, and his legacies 1/3, or if he has made a waqf in respect of his property, it has to be given, and whatever is remaining will be, which has to be devolved upon the legal heirs. So next, and again here also when it comes, again it has to go through the sharers. It has to go through the sharers, then residuaries and distant kindreds. Again, the sharers remotes the residuaries, and residuaries remotes the kindreds. So if there are sharers are there, then the residuaries except with in respect of the son. Other residuaries will be remoted as such. As I said, the sharers in respect of the sunnis, like there is a table has been given by the Quran. Here the table is that the father will get the 1/6 share of the property if there is no child or son. Child here is son or the daughter is there to a Muslim. If there is a son or a daughter, the father inherits as a residuary. For example, a Muslim dies and he has a father, but he does not have a son. Then the property to the extent of 1/6 will go to the father and the remaining property will be given to the other legal heirs. But if a son is there, the father inherits. If there is no, if the son is there, he will inherit only to the extent of 1/6 of the property. And the other portion will go to the residuaries. Okay. Next will be the true grandfather, that is father's father. He will also get 1/6 of the share. And again, if there is no child or he does not have his own child, that is of my father or the deceased father, then the entire property will go as him as a residuary without any share pattern. Then husband gets 1/4, or if he has son, he gets half. If he has a son, he gets 1/2. If he does not have a son, he gets 1/4 of the property. If for the mother, if there is no son, mother gets 1/3. If there is a son to the person, he gets 1/6. So there is a table which has been laid down in the table of sharers. And if you want to check, if you go to Google, you will get a website where fortunately they have made a calculator, inheritance calculator of Muslim law. Just you type how many members are there, how many shareholders, father-mother relationship, that app, the website will itself calculate the entire aspect of the share. So it is more easier for you to, rather than sitting and calculating, the website will calculate for you and give the proper as per the share, because it is fixed by the Quran itself. Like when we go to Hindu succession, it is quite complicated because there is a web of relationship. But here, as it is fixed by Quran itself, no proper calculation can be done by the help of a website. Next, we'll go to, so the calculation will be there as such. Next, we'll go to the residuary part as such. But in residuary part, when we go into the residuary part, here the son comes as the first residuary holder. Here, son, whatever is remaining will go to the son. But if it, even though daughter, if the daughter is there, daughter comes under the sharer. If there is a son, then daughter from the first category, she falls to the second category of residuary, and she will share with the son. And but again there is a catch here. Whatever son gets, half share will be given to the daughter. So she will not be getting what son gets. She will get only 1/2 of the what the son gets as such. Now let us go to the Sunni law aspect. Division how Sunni and Shia school of inheritance are there. Here, one aspect of Islamic jurisprudence is that, of inheritance is that, Islamic law does not recognize the doctrine of representation. It does not recognize the doctrine of representation as that of Roman law, as that of Hindu law. It follows two aspects of per capita and per strip distribution of inheritance. Per capita and per strip distribution of inheritance. Here, the Muslim Sunni law, here in respect of the whoever is nearer to the deceased person, he excludes the remote. So sharer remotes the excluder, the residuary, except the son, and the lost kindred. Here, let us take example. If two heirs are there who claim inheritance for the common ancestor, the heir who is nearer in degree to the deceased would exclude the heir who is remoter. For example, let us say that is whoever is nearer to the deceased, he will exclude the person who is the remote. Let us give an example here. A Muhammadan person dies, leaving behind his two sons. Okay, a person dies, Muhammadan dies, leaving behind his two sons. Here, the two sons will get equal shares, half of the property. Another case scenario here. The Muslim has two sons, A and B. A is alive. B has predeceased his father, leaving behind his two sons. Question here is whether after the death of the Muhammadan Muslim, whether the children of B will get the share. As per the per capita, they will not get any share. They will not get any share. Here, all the property will go to their uncle, that is A, because of per capita succession. Because their uncle A excludes the remoters, that is his nephews. Okay, that is how Muslim Islamic law in respect of Sunni inheritance works here as such. And let us go to the this per capita distribution here. Per capita succession is as per the heads, as a per capita, as per the head it goes. Here, when we look into the other aspect, another third case scenario I give here is that this same Muslim has two sons, A and B. A has three sons, B has two sons. Okay, A has two sons, B has three sons. A and B have predeceased their father. They have died before the father. So after the death of this Muhammadan, how the share will be devolved as per the Sunni law? Here, each head will get 1/5 each, because the 1/5, five heads are there. 5 heads are there. So property will be devolved upon as 1/5 share as such. This is how, as per the per capita distribution is done under the Sunni school of jurisprudence. Here, you can take I'm making a reference to one Supreme Court judgment here is that Muhammad Amirullah Khan versus Muhammad Hukumullah Khan. Muhammad Amirullah Khan versus Muhammad Hukumullah Khan, 1993, volume 3, SCC, page 733. Wherein Supreme Court said that, wherein High Court says that, as I gave the second example, wherein the nephews did not get the share because of the uncle. That is how it is. Where the same case, in the same case, where the High Court held that nephews have to get as per the succession, but Supreme Court in the appeal allowed the appeal and said High Court was wrong because it did not follow the customary practice of what Sharia says in respect of Sunni law, and said that the uncle had remoted the nephews and the nephews does not get any share as per the per capita distribution of the property as per the Muslim law. Next, we'll go to the Sunni aspect of doctrine of representation. Here, there is a change in Sunni aspect. Here, Sunnis follow per strip distribution of the property. Per strip, as per the strip distribution, not as per the per head. Here, the quantum of the property inherited by each of the heir depends upon the property available to that particular branch of which they belong. Here, the property is distributed as per the branch, not per the head, as per the branch. I will come to the same illustration of the Muhammadan. if the Mohammedan dies, leaving behind his son A and B, the inheritance is A and B will get half of each share, equal. Now let us come to the second scenario, that is the Mohammedan dies, leaving behind his son A, but B has predeceased the Mohammedan, leaving behind his two children. Okay, two children here. Here, as per the Shia law, the nephews will get the property. Nephews will get the property because it is as per the per strip. Because Shia law says that even though the father has deceased, his share is in predeceased for his father, the grandfather's property has to devolve upon the grandchildren as per the per strip distribution of the property. So here so what will happen here is that A will get half of the property and B's children, two children, will get 1/4 each. Third case scenario. M dies. M has two children, A and B. A has two children. Let us say A has three children and B has two children. Both A and B have predeceased the father. How the property will devolve? Here, A's property, B property will be further divided amongst their children. So A has three children. So each of his children will get 1/6 share of the Mohammedan, and the two children of B will get 1/4 of the property. This is how the property will devolve in amongst the Shia law. So that is why I gave that there is a two schools of which follows the inheritance. That is why I took to you to the rudimentary aspect of schools and sources of Muslim law, only to refresh your memory. Next aspect here is that female right of inheritance. Here, female of right, we call it as a obligatory share. Female right is obligatory share. Here, the male and female under Muslim law both are equal, because equal means in respect of inheritance. Here, the female is not considered as a different entity. She gets equal share because Quran itself gives her a share. She is a sharer, Quranic sharer. But if son is there, if she has a brother, she is considered as a residuary and she shares the property with him. But she comes one step down. Whatever the brother gets in share, she will get half of the share which her brother inherits. That is why she get, but she does not have any. But male cannot claim preferential right over the woman. The quantum of property has to be only that half of the property share has to be given to the woman as such. But she cannot be said. It cannot be said that she cannot be detached from the property of the father. Next is the child in the womb. Whether a property can be given to the child in the womb. Here, even a child which has been conceived and is in the womb is entitled for the property. It is entitled for the property provided the child born alive. If the child dies, it does not take birth, then the property has to be distributed as if child is not in the existence. It has to be given. If at the time of distribution of the property, if a woman is conceived, is carrying a child in her womb, then the property has to be, the share has to be kept aside. It should be kept aside. If the child is born, the property has to be given to it. If the child is born dead, then the property will be thrown open to the distribution process. Next aspect is can stepchildren inherit? Stepchildren can inherit the property of a Mohammedan. Here, stepchildren are not entitled to the property of a Mohammedan. Stepchildren are not entitled to the property of a Mohammedan. and vice versa, where step parents are not entitled to the property of the stepchildren. So both of them cannot inherit the property of each other. But again, there is a catch here, is that the step brother or a step sister can inherit the property. That is we use the word consanguine brothers or sisters, consanguine siblings. So if it is a step brother will inherit the property of a step brother. Step sister can inherit the property. Again, in this consanguine relationship, there are two concept is there, two branches there, uterine and agnate. Uterine relationship is where common mother is there. That is, they have shared the same womb, uterus. And in agnate is that the stepbrother or stepsister has shared the same father. So the stepbrother or stepsisters can inherit the property, each other's property. They come under the sharers, the first category of shareholders. Now next is widow's share. Widow's share, if a widow is there, she will get 1/4 of the share of the property. As well as if there are 4 widows, because Muslim Mohammedan can marry to the extent of 4, and 4 wives are there, the 1/4 share has to be divided in that 1/4. So it has to, each will get 1/16 share. 1/16 share will be given. If there is a child to that widow, then the share she will get 1/8. And if there are 4 widows, 1/8 into 4, 132 share will be given to the widows as such. Okay. Next, if there is no legal heirs, no sharers, no residuaries, no kindred distance, what will happen to the property of Muhammadan? It will go to the government by the process of escheat. By the process of escheat, the property will go to the government. Government will take over the property here as such. And another aspect, small variation is here in which is unique to Indian subcontinent is that 2 categories of Muslims, Khojas and Kachi Memons. Khojas and Kachi Memon Muslims who have converted to Muslims, but they follow Hindu customary law of succession. They don't follow the other personal laws. They follow the Hindu successions. They follow Hindu succession in respect of Mitakshara law or Dayabhaga law, but they are converted to Muslims. What is their status? Their status is that one enactment is there that is called the Kachi Memon Act of 1920, Kachi Memon Act of 1920. This supersedes this Shariat Act, where it says that this Khojas and Kachi Memons property has to devolve upon as per their customary practice. Even though they are Muslims, their property has to develop as per the Hindu law, Hindu succession for them. But there was amendment in 1923 for section 2 of this Kachi Memon Act, where it says that if a Kachi Memon in his lifetime files a declaration, makes a declaration saying that my property has to devolve as per the Sharia, then only his property can be devolved as per the Shariat Act. And if he has not filed any declaration, made any declaration, then it has to devolve as per the Hindu law. Yes. Vikram, you can take over now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for a very informative presentation. Now, can we move on to the Q&A session, sir? All right. Can we have the first question, please? Yes, Gupta sir, I have unmuted you.
Sir.
Thank you, Trivikram.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Sir, I'm thrilled to know the subject through you. I'm extremely happy, Sachidanand.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. Now, you say there is a catch.
Yes.
Muhammadan law itself is a catch, if I'm correct. All ifs and buts. Now, in gift, you say no registration is required.
Yes.
Now, suppose Muslim Muhammad A during his lifetime
Yes.
has sold the property. The legal as a one after the sale transaction is over, the another person comes that this property is gifted to me. There are no documents. The kata stands in the name of the earlier owner, and the property is in the occupation of the tenant.
Okay.
Now, Sachidan, you understood my question, sir?
Sir, in between there was a, I think your voice did not come.
Okay, sir.
Please, I want tenant was the tenant's kata is there.
The
Okay.
tenant,
Yeah.
sir. The
I heard till tenant possessed the kata.
see, Muhammad has sold the property, and
Yes.
the property was in the occupation tenant.
Okay.
After the sale transaction is over, his son
Sold or gift?
gift. I'm sorry.
Gift.
After
Yes.
the gift tax is over,
Hmm.
I'm sorry. Please, I will repeat it, sir. Sorry.
Sir.
The property is sold by Muhammadan, sir.
Sold. Okay, sir.
Property was in the occupation of the tenant.
Yes, sir.
Now his son comes into the fray. He says, "This property is gifted to me."
Yes.
There is no declaration. The kata was in the name of the father, and the purchaser has got the kata in his name.
Yes, sir.
Then what is the son's
Stand.
stand?
Yes. So, just can I improve the question if with your kind permission?
Okay.
Yeah. So, Mohammedan has sold the property,
Yes.
and the sale is in respect of transfer of property, where there is registration and document is there completed. And in respect of the gift, son comes and says that prior to the sale, there was a gift, oral gift.
Yes.
Yes, sir. That is your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Before the prior to the sale, my father had given a declaration, and I am in possession of the property.
Yes.
Sir, and regarding the possession, you have to tell me regarding the possession now.
That is in the occupation of the tenant, sir.
Occupant, sorry. In respect of the sale, there can be any, usually in the sale, constructive possession will be given to the buyer.
Everything is followed under the sale document, registered document.
So in constructive possession has been given to the purchaser.
Yes.
Where the sale says that there are tenants, they are in possession of the property.
Yes.
Yes. So, sir, now here the gift son comes and says that there is a declaration by my father. And now, sir, let us presume the father is no more.
Yes.
Right?
No, during the age of the father, it has sold.
Yes. No, and yes, sold. And father is no more now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Fine. Now, Supreme Court in Hafiza Bibi versus SK Farid, that is why I made the reference to this particular Supreme Court judgment. Here it says that there should be a declaration of the gift, as you said. There was let us say there is a declaration gift. And there was acceptance of the gift by the donee.
Yes.
Okay. So, let us say he proves the two aspects. But the question of delivery of possession should be there. I said where the delivery should be either actual or constructive possession. Sir? Right,
Yes.
sir?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. When there is a document is there, sale deed is there, operation of section 91 will come into picture of Indian Evidence Act.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Right,
sir.
sir? Best evidence rule will come into picture.
Yes.
So courts have to go as per Section 91 of Evidence Act rather than oral declarations. Here we have to look into that who is possession of the property, that is tenant. And as you said that the statement of the sale deed said that there is constructive possession of the property to the purchaser, then it shows that property has been delivered. So he has to lose the case. There is no, so son fails in this case to prove that there is a proper gift because the third essential element is not proved.
Okay. There is one more catch there. I will tell you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Tenant is also a Muslim. He is saying this son that I am paying the rent to the son.
Yes.
What is it? What is the fate of the purchase?
Tenant says, I am paying the rent to the son.
Yes, his son.
Yes. Yes.
I have recognized his son as my landlord.
Yes, sir. The son is the landlord. Here again, sir, whether we have to come into section X, whether it comes under the exclusion of section 91 of Evidence Act, the oral evidence can remove the strength of section 91 document.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Section 91 has to come in, will come into picture here, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we have Mr. B.N. Suresh Babu. Yes, I have unmuted you, sir. Very quickly, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Carlos. Question.
Hello.
Mr. B.N. Suresh Babu. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Sachin, I have one question.
Yeah, yes, Suresh. Yeah.
That the one A buys the property out of his self-acquired, self-earned fund. So he wants to gift that entire property to his wife.
Yes.
He has no issues.
Yes.
Can he give the entire property to his wife?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
that is the condition that she has to perform all his last rituals and other things. And whatever the modes it is. Can she give the entire property?
Yes, Mohammedan can in his lifetime can give the entire property to his any person, even to a stranger also.
No, because is that the concept of self-earned is there in that Mohammedan also?
No. Here the concept or joint family ancestral property does not come into operation in Muslim law. It only comes into operation only in Hindu law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we have Mr. Ashok KR.
Chandrasekhar.
Mr. Ashok KR, I have unmuted you. You can quickly go ahead with your question.
Sir, this is Ashok Kumar, advocate, sir.
Sir.
This is Ashok Kumar, advocate, sir.
Please, sir. Please, sir.
I have three questions, sir.
Please, sir.
Is there adoption prevailed in Mohammedan law?
Adoption is not there, sir. It is considered as haram.
Haram. Then, a gift only in respect of life interest to second wife, can it be absolute or limited?
No, sir. No conditions can be there for in the gift, sir. No conditions can.
What happens if there is what happens if the gift is made with a limited life interest to second wife? She dies. What happens?
The entire gift becomes the extent of the condition is not valid, sir, because conditional gift is not entertained.
Do you mean it will be absolute gift?
Yes, it is absolute gift. There cannot
The
be
third,
conditions. Or
I
there
want
cannot be. There cannot be conditions. There cannot be contingencies, sir.
Yes. Third point, can I raise?
Yes, sir. Please, please, sir.
A father dies, leaving behind two wives who are also dead.
1 minute, sir. 2 wives dead. Yes.
Dead. And he has got 2 sons, 1 daughter.
You have to tell me which wife has which
Sunila.
Sir? No. Which wife has which son, which daughter?
I will tell you, sir. The second wife has no issues. First wife has got 3 children.
Yes, sir.
2 sons and 1 daughter.
2 sons and 1 daughter. Yes.
1 daughter. Out of 2 sons, 1 eldest son died.
Mm-hmm.
His wife and children are alive.
Yes, sir.
Accordingly, second son is alive. Daughter is died.
Yes, sir.
I want the share ratio, sir. Can you help me?
Who wants share here? The
Here,
granddaughter, right?
Daughter-in-law of the father.
1 minute.
And
That is the
grandson
second.
and
Yes, sir.
Huh?
And the
Yeah,
grandson of A, son of A.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes. As per the per capita succession in Sunni law, sir.
Yes.
As per the per capita
Yes, sir. Sunni law.
distribution of under Sunni law, the B remotes, B is alive, A is dead. B remotes the children of A.
Yes.
Okay. And his wife, another widow, she has a Quranic hire. Hello.
Quranic hire. Okay.
Quranic hire will get a share. She will get a share. She will get a share as well as the son will also get a share.
What about a daughter, sir?
Daughter will also get, because she is also a sharer. The son and daughter will get the share, as well as the second, the first wife also will get share. But the grandchildren of the children of A, who has predeceased the father, will not get any shares.
Yes.
Okay, sir? Yeah.
Will not get any share.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Can we have the next question? Okay, I am unmuting Mr. Chandrasekhar.
1 minute. Just 1 minute.
No problems.
Yeah. Sorry.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, I have unmuted you. You can go ahead with your question. Sir, I have given you the option. You will have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Sachidanand, can you hear me my question?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Sir.
It's an extension question of Mr. Satyanarayan Gupta.
Yes, sir.
A minor child, after 26 years, he files a suit claiming that his father, he being the last child of his father, has gifted a property. It's an agriculture land when he was about 9 months old.
9 months old. Okay.
Father, prior to that, father had other 8 children. He has excluded all the 8 children and gifted. This is what is claimed before the court.
Okay.
In between, already the father has sold about 16 years back itself, and the property vests with the purchaser. Titles are vested with the purchaser, including the kappa and other things and all.
Okay.
What is the status of that purchaser?
Sir, I have to come to a limitation act here, sir. When a person becomes a major, within 3 years he has to challenge all the partition. Now you say he is 26 years. So by virtue of operation of limitation act, he does not have any chance.
But still court has admitted the suit and the process is going on.
Sir, operation limitation will come. Admission will not come. On merits, operation of law, he will not have a chance.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sharma, you can go ahead with your question.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Mr.
Hello.
Yes,
hello, sir. This is Sharma from Bengaluru Bar Association.
Yes, Mr. Sharma.
Sir, whether in Muslim law, what is called CR Sunni. CR Sunni. Okay, sir. Hello. I am audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please.
Yes, sir. Whether any concept is there, Sridhana?
See, concept of Sridhana does not come into picture here is because
Yes, sir.
two things are there. One
Yes,
is
sir.
mahar. She
Mahar.
gets a property at the time of marriage contract.
Yes.
Okay, the husband before entering to the contract of marriage, he has to give some consideration. That is one
Yes, sir.
aspect. Second is she comes under the Quranic hire and she gets the property of the father. So concept of Stridhana does not come here because as father dies, she gets a property.
Was only for Hindu because Hindu.
Yes, Stridhana is applicable to Hindu.
Yeah, okay.
This does not come on picture here because see, when we look into the aspect of Hindu women, she did not
Yes,
have a right because
Yes.
of operation of 1955 Act and the present 2005 enactment. There are shares has been given in respect of the father's right as well as the ancestral property by virtue of the amendment. But in Muslims, by virtue of Quran itself, she gets a right. He is equally treated. There is no preferential treatment of husband, son or daughter. Daughter gets equal share, gets a preferential share from father's property. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jayasimha, I have unmuted you. Quickly, you can pose your question. That would be the last question for the day.
Sir, hello.
Yeah.
You said when it comes to gift, when it comes to oral gift, hello.
Yeah,
Am I audible, sir?
Yes. Please go
When
ahead.
it comes to oral declaration, oral gift declaration is mandatory, correct?
Yes.
You have quoted one Supreme Court in respect to that, correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. How declaration has to be done?
See,
That is my question.
Yes. As an advocate, we will come to how to prove the case. That is the challenge we face in the court, right? How to prove? If document is there, it is easier to prove. But how to prove the oral?
Okay.
Oral. See, if you remember, I said that it has to go as per Section 3 of Evidence Act, circumstantial
Okay.
evidence.
Sir,
If you have,
sorry for interruption.
yeah.
Sorry for interruption, sir.
Yeah.
If there is a document
Yes.
of declaration, how it has to be there? The declaration document, how it has to be there?
Yeah, it is the declaration document can be as a gift deed only. So hereby declare that I hereby give my this particular property to B, and B has accepted the property and have delivered the property. If there is a declaration, written declaration is there, even that is enough. If he gives a oral declaration saying that I hereby give this property to B in front of two witnesses, that is why I said in respect of Islamic law, even stand of witness is important here. That is two adult Muslim who follow the either Shia or Sunni. If they are of a different school, then there should be three. If that's the same school, it should be two witnesses. Those witnesses have to come and say that the declarations were made before me, oral declarations. If it is a written declaration, it can be in writing, saying that it can be a regular gift deed only, what we prepare as a document. Even it is not registered as per Section 17 of Registration Act, or as per registered as or as per the Transfer of Property Act also, it is not, it is okay. Because Supreme Court, because operation of 129 comes into picture of operation of 129 of transfer of property comes into picture.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Before we wind up, I see Mr. Raj Shekhar raising his hand. We will just give him opportunity. Yes, sir, I have unmuted you.
Hello, sir.
Sir.
I just want a clarification. What should happen to a property, a gifted property, Mohammedan gift being an oral gift? The very same person encumbering, or rather offering the property as security to a loan to any financial institution or bank. In your opinion, the lien on the in respect of these property by the financial institutions will prevail, or the gift being prior in date?
Yes. Here, Supreme Court of India, I'll just again quote the same judgment.
Yes.
Here, even the property is mortgaged. Even the property is mortgaged. That property can be subject matter of gift. But your question is, who will have the
First lien.
charge?
Yeah, who will have
First charge.
Yes.
Yes, obviously the bank will have the first charge for the property because the donor has given it. If he has to challenge, the donor has to challenge. He has to go to the court of law and he has to claim his right over the property. Saying
my query is, adjudication apart, who is to have precedence? Whether the bank is to have precedence or the person who has taken it as a gift?
As per the documentation, bank will have precedence, right? Because overall declarations will not stand in the court of law. It has to, if you go to the court, again, sir, I'm repeating again, section 91 comes in 91 of Indian evidence comes into operation here.
Yes.
Right? The best evidence rule. Any disposition made has to be as per the law. What law? Registration Act, Transfer of Property Act. That is what section 91 says. But if we have to bring the operation of Muslim law here, then we have to, the person who goes to the court, he has to go and declare his right of gift, saying that the mortgage was void because the property has already been gifted, and I have not encumbered my property in, I have not entered in khata.
Sir, in your opinion, if gift gets proved,
yes,
who will be getting the precedence?
The gift, the son will get the precedence.
The gift would stand.
Yes, gift would stand.
Please.
Gift would
Thank
stand.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because again and again, I'm saying that 91 has to be will come into operations, and you have to prove the exclusion. The case, your case, when he has to prove the oral disposition of the property, he has to come into the exclusions of section 91. That is 92, 93, 94 till 98. The exclusions are there.
Yes.
He has to prove that exclusions, saying that the property has been, and he has to prove that how he has taken the delivery of the possession of the property. After taking the delivery of the property, what he has done? Khata has been transferred to him. If he has transferred the khata to him, paid the taxes, and enjoyed the property, he has a stand. If he has taken the property orally, slept on his right, law will not help a person who is sleeping on his right. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now we have hit the fag end of this session. Once again, sir, on behalf of Advocates Association Bengaluru, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to you for today's wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you for the Advocate Association Bangalore to give an opportunity, as well as I thank my peers as well as my senior advocates who asked questions and tried to cajole me I tried my level best to give answer to the extent of my limitations. Giving the opportunity to present myself before you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would also like to thank Mrs. Nalini Kumari, Judicial Officer, for her participation. Thank you so much, ma'am. With this, sir, we will be now concluding today's webinar. We'll be signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.